If you ask 5 people about what it means to be a strong and self assured woman and how to help younger women and girls to get there, you're going to get 6 different opinions. We're all our own person, and there's really no one size fits all personality. But there is something we can do. Maybe I should say there are things we can do to influence the next generation in a positive way. And even more importantly than do, who can we be? How can we think to make sure we're making that difference for younger women? Let's talk about it. Welcome to Mind Your Midlife, your go to resource for confidence and success, one thought at a time. Unlike most advice out there, we believe that simply telling you to believe in yourself or change your habits isn't enough to wake up excited about life or feel truly confident in your body. Each week, you'll gain actionable strategies and, oh my goodness, powerful insights to stop feeling stuck and start loving your midlife. This is the Mind Your Midlife podcast. OMG, hello, listeners. So, I have a daughter and a son, and as they were growing up, I was always asking myself if we were treating them the same or differently, and should we be in each of these different instances? And you could really fall down an overthinking rabbit hole for sure. Our daughter was always a strong personality, and that was lucky because we didn't worry about her being influenced by others. We worried or we tried to help her learn how to use her powers for good, I used to say. And gosh, I'm similar to that too. But the role of women in society is always changing and can be very confusing on any given day and at any given age. So I am excited to talk to my guest today and see if we can decide on some ways of thinking that can make a difference. Nellie Harden is a wife, a mother to 4 daughters, and an author and speaker in the space of family life and leadership. She is really focused on helping women and young women, growing girls, build their foundation and know their worth and their value. And I am just thrilled to have Nellie joining me today. Okay, well, welcome, Nellie. I'm happy you're here.
Hi, thanks so much for having me.
Absolutely. I'm excited to talk about this. And let's just kind of jump right in the pool and talk about how did you even really get here where you're focused on working with young women and the women who are raising those young women and how to do that and help their self-esteem.
I think in a nutshell, it really just comes down to I became the thing that I needed before and didn't have. you know?
Okay.
And I mean, I feel like in all the work that I've done from in a human at a human level anyway, which I'll tell you what that means in a second. That has been the work that I've done. I found the hole that I needed filled for myself, and it wasn't there, so I filled it for myself to help others that are going through a similar situation or similar season of life. And so, my entire background is in biology and psychology, and my career 1.0 was actually in the animal realm. And so I worked with humpback whales, I worked with gorillas, I worked in some veterinary surgical work, like all the this biological and to behavior side, but with animals first. But it was around 2007 that I hopped over the proverbial fence into the much more messy human world from the animal world. And so I've been working in first. To my point, I was working with our family. So, what happened in 2007? Well, I got pregnant with twins. I have 4 daughters. And so, my middle two are twins. And so, I had a 2-year-old at the time. Now, I was pregnant with twins. And then, not too long after it, within a year, I was pregnant. I retired from all animal stuff because let me tell you, when you are pregnant and especially pregnant with twins, any smell that comes from anything to do
Oh,
with animal anything is revolting, to say the least. And so I retired from all of that, and I needed a more stable schedule anyway, because working with large animal, especially if you're traveling, is just difficult for family life. So anyway, I retired from all of that. But within a year, my husband was diagnosed with a cardiac condition that was a congenital problem, but we had to make a lot of changes within our family. And so that's when I started applying a lot of the things that I knew and had studied, and then started studying even more and diving into more about how to help our family through this transition. Here we are having baby number 2 and 3 with a 2-year old and a husband that is sick. And then, we went on and had another a baby after that. And this was after infertility. So, the full
wow.
pendulum swung one way and then it fully swung the other way and threw in a heart condition. So, but my point being that throughout that transition, it was about 3, 4 years that I was really just working within our family unit, and making the changes that needed to happen, having the conversations, developing the communication, physiological changes, all of these things. And then I was really, there's no other word for it except for called to get out there and help other people that were trying to work on positive family disciplines, and what that
Mhm.
looked like, and how to transition from where you are into a better space with positive family disciplines. And so that's what I've been doing out in the public then since about 2010 to 2012, is when I started doing that and refining where I am now. Now, like I said, I have 4 daughters. So, and being a woman myself, it just is where I naturally landed, of
Mhm.
course, to be helping people raising young women, especially because my own story of when I was an adolescent. I grew up, and I graduated high school early and went 7 hours away from home. And then I didn't know it at all then, but or have this self awareness then. But I was not ready to be out in the world. I did not
Mm.
have any internal infrastructure of self worth, self esteem, confidence. And when you release a young woman out into the world without that foundation, then they end up like I did, chasing worth in anywhere and everywhere that they can find it, which can be very detrimental, as it was for me as well. And so, in the midst of all of this, also, I was on a very intense and focused healing journey for the past several decades from that time in my life, while dealing with all of these too. So, I've been the young woman that needed this foundation. I've been the young woman that what foundation I did have was wiped clean by trauma. And I've been the woman raising women with this very intentional foundation too. So, on all levels, this is where I
Mhm.
landed in the work I do.
Something you said that if we don't have this esteem, self worth infrastructure,
Mhm.
we end up chasing worth wherever we can find it. That's so powerful
Yeah.
because I can just see so many examples. And I guess it does happen a lot in teens, high school, college, but it could be at any age, of course, that
Yeah.
we're looking externally to fit in or to have somebody reflect back to us something positive because we don't have it in ourselves. Absolutely.
Oh, just recently. This has been a lifelong endeavor for me. And so, as the thousands and thousands of pages of research that I have read, the thousands of pages that I've written and everything, it still doesn't stop some of those knee jerk reactions that happen, right? Because I had to build this foundation as an adult, which is not impossible, but it is much harder to do as an adult than it is in an adolescent time period, because of the physiology, there we go, of brain development, right? We're a lot more malleable,
Yes.
we're a lot more formidable during that adolescent time frame than we are as an adult. But like I said, not impossible, but just harder. And so, last week, just seeing how this fits into, real life. Last week, I was somewhere and this woman walks in the room, and it is just this woman that can just zap everything out of me. And she's not a bad person.
Mm.
It's just that when I am around her, I feel worthless, to be quite honest and transparent, and to be vulnerable like that. And I really encourage, I was running a workshop on Saturday to, I was like, I'll go first and I'm going to be the vulnerable one here, because that's how we can grow, is through vulnerability, right? But like I said, a couple weeks ago, or last week, I guess, this woman walked into the room and I was like, wow, that's so crazy that that power can still be in me. I just fall back to that Swiss
Mm.
cheese knee jerk reaction foundation, that I had, that was full of holes and so frail before. And then I have to remind myself, no, this is the work we've done, Nellie. This is where I am
Yes.
now. Right. And so it's easy to fall back, but if you have the right tools, you remember, wait, this is where we are now, right? And
Yeah.
not to be down on yourself about that, or to feel, shame or guilt about that either. It can be an honoring reflection of where you were and where you could stay, but where you are now and where you can build to.
I love, love, love that angle. And actually, when I was first learning how to change the way I thought about myself years ago, the coach I was working with said, "Stop, stop thinking that you're going to graduate from this. Don't
Hmm.
graduate from this. This is always the work you're doing. You're always checking your mindset, adjusting, growing, always, forever. Like that's the work." And it helped me so much to know that because I wanted to, like, get an A in that course, totally healed and perfect.
Yep. I will never feel that way again, ever. And that's just not reality.
Yeah. Well, the other things that we've been chatting about are bringing up a few things in mind. I was talking with a friend recently who said, "Yeah, I wish that back in I think she was talking about her late teens, early 20s. She said, anybody who really liked me enough to want to date me, I couldn't understand why they would, and I thought that meant there was something wrong with them, and I shoved them all away, and I wish I
Mm,
had known differently then." So there's just so many ways this can show up for sure, but that one struck me
absolutely.
really.
Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely. That's a form of self-sabotage right there,
yeah,
right?
absolutely. So when you are working with girls, young women, the varying ages, are you working with them and with their mothers, their parents? Does it go both ways?
Absolutely. I mean, ideally, in Nellie's ideal world, I would take every, parent that is or and it's not just parents, it's also leaders, right?
Mhm.
If you're a teacher, if you're a coach, if you're a youth leader, anyone that is impacting and influencing the life of an upcoming generation, right? This pertains to you, especially. It's just with parents, we're around it 24/7.
Yeah.
And there it's around at 11:30 p.m. and at 6 a.m. and 3 p.m. all the time. But the point is, yes, so I would love to take everybody and teach them together how to build worth, esteem, and confidence, because it's one thing for us to all hear, we should have it, right? There's all the shoulds, right? You should have worth, you need to have worth, you should have esteem, and all of these things. But okay, that's great, but how do we logistically actually build that? And that was the hole that I came in, and I was like, I need to figure out the actual blueprint framework for this so people can do it. And it's different for everybody too, because every single person is different. And so that's what I've been able to do and what I teach people. It is one framework with a different outcome for every single person. But when what I do work with just adolescents, and I do work with just adults, and ideally I work with both. And here's why. What I found was, when I'm working with just adolescents, if they go home and they are like, "Oh, I learned this and I want to try this," and the parents or the leaders aren't on board, then it doesn't really go anywhere, right? Because there's this hierarchy differential there that's like, "Oh, you're just a kid, you're learning this thing, great." And a lot of times there's an issue there. And if I'm just teaching the parents and they go to the child and say, "Oh, this, is so cool," the kid is many times like, "Oh my goodness, it's another thing my parents are trying to do." And it's
Mm.
just the wah, 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 type of
Yes.
mentality. And so as far as the child goes, that third party validation, it's not just mom and dad's idea, this is coming from someone else, is very, very important. And so that's
Mhm.
why it's ideal to have them work together. And, I have a program called Take the Lead that is a self, driven a video series, but there's parent stuff and there's kid stuff and there's stuff to do together for that reason. I think it's really important that they work together with a third party source.
Yeah, I can see what you're saying because I have 2 kids who are now in their 20s, 1 girl, 1 boy, and I'm just remembering my daughter in high school. There would have been some "wah, wah, wah," I think, and I don't think she would mind me saying that, like, whatever was coming out of my mouth, she was taking in some of it, but definitely not all of it.
Hmm. Absolutely. It's kind of around a joke around here, I guess. My one of my daughters, anyway, she was talking to my husband not too long ago, and she was like, "Oh, if mom takes us into the side room, I know we're in there for a while, because dad takes us in, and it's like this is what needs to happen, and blah blah blah, very short and to the point. Mom takes us in, and it's like, well, how are you feeling? Like, what is going on? And for some of my kids, that works, and for some, it does not. And that's another reason why this blueprint is so important, because you need to know how to parent that child, right?
Yeah.
And all 4 of my daughters are 4 corners of a square, I call them, because they're so very different. And but anyway, that was just said the other day, and I thought it was pretty funny. I was like, okay, yeah, I guess I got a little overwinded with that one. It would work for your sister, but for you, no.
Right, right, right. And parents are different too, right? So you
Yes,
might be
very.
more inclined to talk about one part of it and your husband a different thing. And yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, more likely, the main listeners to this episode, until they maybe share it with their daughters, are going to be the moms or the teachers or the leaders. As you said, it could be in the community, in the church, in the school, whatever, who are working with the girls or the young women.
Mhm.
So, what are some, I don't know if lessons are the right word, but what are some kind of ideas or concepts that they would want to kind of take to heart or try out, even just from this conversation?
Yeah, well, number 1 thing that everyone has to keep in mind is this foundation that I'm talking about is like a 3-tiered cake, if you will. So that bottom really thick part is worth. On top of that is esteem. On top of that is confidence. And up at the very like summit, the pinnacle of all of it is to be a self-disciplined leader of your own life, right? That is the goal. That's where we want to take them to, because we want to love and lead them to a place that they love and lead themselves, right? That
Mhm.
we're raising people, we're not raising kids, right? And so that's where we want to go. But that foundation needs an address. And that address is security. And you always have to start there. I mean, you think about, people that are gifted in being a hostess, or, I am not one of those people. But those people that, if you go over to their house, they just are just, you know, bathing your every need in servanthood, right? And I'm the person, you come to my house, I'm like, oh yeah, go get the pans are there and the cups are there, and
Same.
mikasa sukasa, make yourself at home. But I'm not necessarily the one that is like, oh, can I help? Oh, can I help you? Oh, can I help you? So it's just kind of funny, different people, right? But there's a security piece that needs to be there. And so if you're a coach, per se, and they come to you on day 1, you don't want to be yelling in their face, right? That doesn't serve as a platform for growth. If you're a parent, it can't constantly be ultimatums and yelling. There needs to be a security there. They need to know that they're secure in their families, they're secure in their home, they're secure in their school, which is a whole other topic of how things are rocked
Mhm.
today, right? But security is really important, and meeting those basic needs. I always say, I'm writing a book right now, and in the book the other day I said, you'd be shocked how far a small bag of cheese crackers can go, as far as laying the foundation for trust in a connection between you and
Hmm.
somebody, you and a student. But anyway, so that's there. And then understanding worth piece. So each child and each woman, every person that ever has, is, or will exist, has these 5 basic pillars of worth that need to be followed. And that is they need to be seen, and they need to be heard, and they need to be loved, and they need to know they belong, and they need to have a purpose. And so
Mhm.
when you can work that into how you are relating to this person and have some of these, depending on your relationship with them, of course, but especially as a parent, having these conversations of how do you best feel seen, right? How do you best feel heard? Do you feel heard in our home? If not, can you tell me some ways that I can help you feel heard more often, right? And being vulnerable and open to those answers, whatever they may be as well. But those 5 pillars of worth are going to set you up leagues beyond anything that you might have going on right now, right? And
Yeah.
also just look at the antithesis of each one of those, because those are the problems that we're seeing today in our adolescents. And quite honestly, especially in our women between 45 and 64 ish, also like 40s, 50s, early 60s, is nobody sees me. My
Mm.
ideas are not being heard. Nobody hears me. I'm invisible. I'm mute, right? I do not feel loved. I do not feel like I belong here. I want to run away. And what is my purpose now? I don't have a purpose. And so
Wow.
we can really relate to them, especially as a middle-aged woman raising these adolescents. They're in 2 different camps, but we're both feeling that way. And if we can come together and be vulnerable and open and let them know and have them let us know, we can really connect on that level too. Yeah.
Gosh, such a good point because it is a big topic of conversation in this middle age period where we women are saying nobody sees me. You know,
Yeah.
what am I doing with my life now? I raised my kids and now what am I doing? Or I'm about at the end of my career, now what am I doing? So I appreciate that you draw that parallel. Interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. But so that's what we need to build. What we need to keep an eye out for are the roadblocks to that. So there are roadblocks to worth, and they are, very much comparison. Comparison is
Mhm.
always going to be a roadblock right there. And today, more than ever, because we have the wonderful social media that is
Social
all
media.
around us all the time, right? So there is comparison, there's perfectionism, right? And always trying to be better and be perfect. And perfectionism is a lie, but it doesn't stop us from striving for it, head on. There's also people pleasing and trying to be the chameleon effect, right? Like I'm this way at church, I'm this way at school, I'm this way at home, I'm this way with this person. And that gets exhausting. And then you can start to forget who you are in between.
Mhm.
Wait, oh wait, I no, I have the wrong mask on right now, right? Hold on, let me reframe that, right? And that gets just exhausting. And to our point that we were saying earlier of you don't feel seen because you've been wearing so many masks. And identity shifting distraction is another one today. We are so distracted by everything today. And if we could really just focus on making our life more simple, we could get back to more simple emotions as well and really ground ourselves in that. But we're getting a steamrolling toward more complicated chaos, distraction in our worlds, which is being felt internally as well.
Yeah, everything is faster and faster and faster. And either we're worried about trying to keep up and we're on the devices and everything, or we're just kind of distracted by the idea that we should be, maybe.
Yeah.
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 A Absolutely,
Yeah.
or distracted that we shouldn't be, and, I mean, the
Yeah.
fact that they have boxes that you can lock your phone in now that, time out, it's like, wow, we've gotten to that point that we have to have a phone jail, that no one can break into, and then, you hear these stories of some kids or honestly some adults as well breaking these boxes open because they're like, "Nope, this is ridiculous, I want my phone back. I'm not going to wait 15 minutes," you know?
Yeah. Gosh. So, something that sort of popped up for me when we were talking is I love the idea of being able to speak with teens. And probably I'm thinking about my own kids, but again, students, whatever, about how what would they want me to do for them to feel seen, or how could they feel
Mm,
seen or
mhm.
heard? However, what would you say, to someone who is hearing that and thinking, "I just can't imagine my teen wanting to have that conversation." Like, I would get an eye roll and they would leave the room. How do you have any advice on kind of getting their buy-in a little bit, starting a little bit with those types of things?
Yeah, it doesn't have to be a formal, how do you feel seen or what have you. Recently, I was having let's call it intense fellowship with one of my daughters. And so, we were talking. She was upset about something that we have a healthy boundary around, but she was not seeing it as a healthy boundary. She was seeing it as a stripping of her freedom, right? And so she kept saying, "You're not listening, you're not listening, you're not listening." And which to her meant, "You're not abiding by what I want," right? And so
Mm,
just helping her define her own terms. And when I ask, when you say we're not listening to you, because we obviously are, we're all sitting in the kitchen, you've been talking for the last, 15, 20 minutes. We are listening to you. And then because there's a difference obviously between hearing and listening, right?
mhm, mhm.
And there's many times when I'm talking to my daughters and I hit the what I call the yes ma'am wall, and that is when I know they're just hearing me. So I'm like, so this, yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Yeah. I was like, you're not
Right.
listening to me anymore. Right. And so I let her know, I said, that's not what's happening. You're saying things and I'm responding and I'm taking what you're saying into consideration. But what is your definition of us listening to you? And she said,
Mm.
well, nothing's going to change. I said, well, maybe or maybe not, but that doesn't mean I didn't listen to you. So just helping her
Mm.
define her terms and what she's talking about. It's not like I sat down and said, and used psychological speak, if you will, and said, how do you feel heard in this moment right now?
Right, right.
I was just helping her define her terms and what we were going through there, because then she can start to unravel some things. And another thing that is really, really helpful to use sometimes when you're talking to adolescents, and honestly, when you're talking to anybody, is something that a trick I use called a clarity board. Okay. And it doesn't have to be a board. I just called it that because of a dry erase board I used once, but it could be a piece of paper too. So when people are taking in information, that is learning. And when people are putting out information, either through words or actions or anything, that is teaching. It's this constant ebb and flow breathing of information out of our lives that happens every moment of our life, except for when we're
Mhm,
sleeping. And so when we're taking it in, we take in things differently. Some people are, visual learners or auditory learners, right? On all of these things. There's four main ones, but there's a host of other smaller ones, and
mhm,
we're all different on the spectrum of this. But many times in a conversation, words and ideas and intentions get lost in the comeback, right? Because you're listening and then you're like, "Oh, what am I going to say in response to this? What am I going to say
yes.
in response to this?" And then you're not actually hearing at all what they're saying. And so something you can bring in is actually writing down your top 5 ideas that you're trying to get through and showing it to them, because then it's not just auditory, it's also visual. They're pausing, they're not thinking about how they're going to retort to something, right away. And they could be like, oh, that's what you mean
Mm,
by this, right? I had another conversation with someone recently that, we're trying to see what is the healthiest way to go forward with them for school, as far as a class, right? And I am trying to set them up for success, but they see it as, you're telling me I'm not good enough. And I was like, that is not at all
mm,
what I am saying, right? And so just really listen, ask a lot of questions, but above all, stay calm, be curious, and connect with them and cultivate a conversation, a tennis match going back and forth with your words, but produce clarity at the end of this. Because if you don't, it's guaranteed that you're going to reschedule this for next Tuesday again, and maybe the next day and the next day. And
yeah,
so there has to be clarity at the end.
yeah, yeah. I love the board idea. I love that. And I'm imagining even being in an argument, like with my husband or something, if we had written down a couple things that we wanted to
Yeah.
talk about, it feels like it would de-escalate before it even started a little
Yeah.
bit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. It just is a I don't know about you, and this is a total aside, but my husband likes to talk at night. I cannot talk at night. If it is post,
Mm.
6 p.m., my brain is not in a functional space to have deep, hard, meaningful conversations. But there's my husband at 10:30 at night going, "So we need to talk about this." I'm like, "What? No, I don't work right now." And then and he keeps going, and then I'm going, and I tell him outright, I'm like, I'm going to say things I really don't mean or understand right now because my brain is not there. Let's push this to lunch tomorrow or something
Yeah.
and have this conversation. But just getting to know yourself, getting to know what your spouse is, and your children, and people you lead, and having the agency and respect to be able to hold that space for a successful conversation is really essential.
Yeah. And it strikes me that underneath all of this is us knowing that we have our own worth and coming from a place of not needing anything from them, right?
Yeah, yeah.
That's a underlying it all.
Absolutely. And we have to know that, and not just hope that we have worth, or not just be told we have worth, but actually truly intrinsically know that we have worth, that we are heard and seen and loved, belong, and purpose by something much bigger than any human that is just around us right there. So it is really important to show up in your full capacity and be able to present yourself and have that vision and vulnerability and resilience and self discipline in order to do what you need to do and teach what you need to teach.
Yeah. I love that. I love that. And I would love to keep talking forever, but I'm also looking at the time and realizing that we just can't do that. So let me just pause here and ask if people are intrigued by what you're saying or they're intrigued by the program that you offer, where can they find you or learn more?
Absolutely. I Speaking of simple, I mentioned earlier, I love to keep it simple, and everything can be found on my website, which is nellieharden.com. And if you're a social media person, then you'll find all the social on there, from Pinterest to Instagram and all the things. And I would love to be able to join you in your inbox every Friday. I release a new article each Friday, and I would love to meet you in there as well. And just grow together toward who you can become, the relationships and the mentorships and the teaching that you can do as well. So everything can be found, downloads, articles, everything can be found there.
I love it. Keep it simple. Perfect. I'm working on that too, simplifying actually. So, as we wrap up, then what would you say is the one key thing? Sometimes I call this the OMG moment
hmm
that's most important for somebody listening to remember.
I just want everybody, like, push in to where you're listening to this right now. And I want to tell you that the world absolutely needs what you have, what you've been equipped with to share with the world. The world
Mm.
needs that. And so get out there and share it. Whether that is a gift that you have, a message that you have, a service that you have, whatever that is, no one ever has, is, or will be created exactly like you. And you are here because you have something unique that only you can share with the world. And the world is waiting for that.
Oh, I love it. I love it. I have goosebumps. Well, Nellie, thank you so much. I that is we're just going to end there because that is the perfect way to end this. Thank you so much for joining me. I really enjoyed this conversation.
Oh, me too. Thank you so much for having me.
What an amazing conversation. Again, goodness, Nellie, thank you. And I don't want to take away from that OMG moment. You are here in this world for a reason. You have the personality, the features, the history, the knowledge, the skills, the talents, all in exactly the combination that you can do something amazing with. So allow yourself to daydream on that a little bit. You're here for a reason. Now, make sure that you engage with Nellie at her website, nellieharden.com, and make sure that you follow Mind Your Midlife on your podcast app and go ahead over to cherylpfisher.com/story cycle and grab my free guide to help you recognize emotions you're feeling and figure out where they're coming from. What is the story? And coming up in episode 6, our next episode, we are going to go further into the joy. You heard us talking about worth today. You heard us talking about all the issues that we face that get in the way of that. Well, what if laughter could help? And specifically, laughter yoga. So I'll see you on that episode. And oh my goodness, let's keep creating confidence and success, one thought at a time.